Howdy folks, and welcome back to me and Shasta's annual Christmas special. In the last video, I mentioned that Titanic: The Legend Goes On was a bad film, but it fell under the category of so bad it's good. This next movie doesn't. In fact, these next two films, specifically the one we're looking at in this episode, are offensive. Like, this fucking movie goes out of its way to be offensive. You folks will see. Oh, will you ever see. One thing I'd like to say before giving you guys the history behind this movie's production is this title actually came out before Titanic: The Legend Goes On. This film was released in 1999, whilst Legend Goes On came out in 2000. Just a one-year difference. So with that out of the way, let's take that short trip into history's pages. Yet again, this animated Titanic movie comes to us from the old country of Italy, only this time it wasn't made by Camillo Teddy. Enter Mr. Orlando Carati. Now, unlike our friend Mr. Teddy, who was, for the most part, involved more in action films, Mr. Carati has always been involved in family movies. In fact, he's the founder and CEO of an Italian animation studio called Mondo TV, and believe it or not, Legend of the Titanic was its first feature. Other films from Mondo TV include Jesus, A Kingdom Without Frontiers, Mother Teresa, and Genghis Khan. I can only imagine how terrible those movies came out. And that's kind of it. Yeah, not much to say about this movie's production. I ran into the same problem with Legend Goes On, but even there I was able to dig up a tad more. I've scoured sites like IMDb, Wikipedia, and even Google. Couldn't find anything other than who made it and what animation studio was behind it. My guess as to how this whole shit show was made goes a little something like this. Mr. Carati, more than likely, saw Cameron's film, liked it, but figured that it needed to be more family-friendly, and, at the same time, also have a heavier-handed message. You know, because a message about the dangers of man's pride and hubris isn't heavy-handed enough. This movie, just like Legend Goes On, probably also got a theatrical release in Italy, but never had a theater run elsewhere, thank God. Though, unlike Legend Goes On, I think Mr. Carati had to pull a lot of strings just to have this film dubbed and released in other nations. I haven't covered a bad movie like this in a while. The last time I reviewed a film this bad was when I reviewed Lawnmower Man 2. Only, I think that this title is actually worse. That's very true, my canine friend. This movie's only gonna succeed in pissing us off. Well, let's do it. The film starts off with this elderly-looking sailor mouse conversing with his several grandchildren. And no, I'm not gonna mention An American Tail, because even though there are mice and other talking animals in this film, none of them are really based on anything that already exists. The movie only rips off one thing, and that's James Cameron's Titanic. So as it turns out, this Grandpa Mouse, whose name is Top Connors, by the way, weird name, used to be a crew member aboard the Titanic.
The maiden voyage of the Titanic. The liner goes down. 100 missing. A lot of people died, huh?
Well, youngster, it's a long and complicated story. The truth of the matter is that those missing persons were never really missing. It's all a misunderstanding.
The fuck do you mean it was a misunderstanding? An estimated 1,500 plus people really died. That's not a misunderstanding. That's what really fucking happened. Misunderstanding. Though to be honest, this little bit of revisionist history from Top has grabbed my attention. The movie then flashes back to the grand send-off of the Titanic, yeah, deja vu, where we meet our main heroine, Elizabeth. We're also introduced to a younger Top and his best friend here, Ronnie. Two other main hero characters that the film throws at us are these two, Don Juan and his pet dog, Smile. Which one? Well, you want to tell the folks watching. Oh, gotcha. I know what scene you're talking about. One thing, though, before we continue on, all of the main hero characters are really fucking annoying and unappealing. By the time this movie's over, you all will see what I mean. Anyway, we get back to Top and Ronnie going through ship protocol, and that's about as boring as you can imagine. And in this next scene, we're introduced to the main villain of this film, Everard Maltravers. And yes, he looks like Falcon 7 from the Birdman cartoons. And to those of y'all who aren't familiar with Birdman, Falcon 7 was a good guy. Granted, that really doesn't matter in the long run, because Maltravers is a joke of a villain anyway. In fact, most of the characters in this movie are a joke. Unlike in Legend Goes On, where they threw as much rip-off characters under the sun at us, Legend instead opts to rip off only James Cameron's Titanic. Elizabeth might as well be Rose, Don Juan might as well be Jack, and Maltravers might as well be Hockley. However, to say that these characters are like the diet soda versions of those in Cameron's film would be insulting to the actual diet version characters. These guys are like the off-brand diet soda versions of the characters from Titanic, and I really wish I were making that up. The reason the characters worked in Titanic is because they were interesting, and they had depth. The characters in this movie are not interesting, and they're all one-dimensional, along with being annoying. I'll show you folks the further we go. So we get a little bit of character development with Elizabeth, where her father and stepmother want her to marry Maltravers. She doesn't want to marry him, though, because according to her, he's a
disgusting old serpent.
But her father is all like,
Elizabeth, don't be impertinent. You have a position to keep up. Your stepmother and I simply want what's best for our little girl.
riveting, right? Going back to Titanic, you could definitely tell that Rose wasn't entirely thrilled about her arranged future marriage to Hockley, but even there it was more subtle, at least in the beginning. Rose also gave a better reason for why she didn't want to marry Hockley. Also, Hockley didn't look nor act like a stereotypical cartoon villain. In this movie, though, it's made pretty damn obvious why Elizabeth doesn't want to marry Maltravers, and so it all ends up being real forced. By the way, I want you folks to remember that scene that I showed concerning Elizabeth and her father, because it's going to come back and bite this film in the ass. Anyway, Elizabeth hates Maltravers, so who's gonna be her love interest in this movie? Why, it's the dancing fool here, Don Juan. Apparently, he's a prince from Andalusia, Spain, and he's traveling with his friends here as well as his pet dog, Smile.
Beautiful girl. Over there. Go to her, Smiley.
Come here, boy. Good boy. You like being petted, don't you? There, that's better, isn't it?
What a heavenly fragrance.
You know, I joked about the hand-rubbing scene in Legend Goes On, but that glove-sniffing shit is legit fucking creepy. So because Elizabeth and Don Juan only caught a glimpse of each other once, it's gotta be true love. Anyway, everyone starts to board the ship, but Don Juan is told by one of the ship's attendants that Smile needs to be on a leash.
Kept on a leash. My good man, you happen to be addressing Don Juan Tenorio, Diariarte Gonzalez Leon.
God damn, man! The guy's just trying to do his job. Lay off! Oh yeah, I forgot to warn you folks. There are a few cringeworthy moments like that in this film. Oh, and Shasta would like to share his opinion on the dog character, Smile. So the Titanic sets sail, and we cut to this scene where it's explained that Maltravers is in command of an entire fleet of whaling ships, and the only reason he has any interest whatsoever in Elizabeth is because her father would grant him worldwide whaling rights if they got married. It's official. Maltravers is a fucking Captain Planet villain. So he tells his yes man named Jeffries to send a telegraph message telling the captains of his whaling vessels to stand by for further instructions. After that, the movie cuts to this Captain Mouse going over ship safety with the other mice.
So for the first few days, be careful how you move about.
Because that's what all children long for, listening to long-winded speeches about boat protocol and safety. I swear, did the creators of this film even know what kids are like? I mean, I have a 9-year-old niece and a 5-year-old nephew, and if they saw this shit, they would find it unbelievably boring. Anyway, we get back to Top and Ronnie looking over the first-class dining hall for some potential leftovers, and Ronnie catches a glimpse of Elizabeth.
I'll see her in my dreams for the rest of my life.
I hate to be a spoilsport, but I would like to draw to your attention the fact that she's a woman and you're a mouse.
Well, there's one thing I'm not, and that's a racist.
Wait, what?
Well, there's one thing I'm not, and that's a racist.
You're a fucking mouse! A completely different species to human! That makes no goddamn sense. This movie is bad and it keeps getting worse. Such as in this scene here where Elizabeth is out on deck and crying. Everything seems normal, right? Watch this.
What's your name? Oh, you can understand us thanks to a net of magic moonbeams that caught your tears as they fell into the water.
Magical moonbeam bullshit. Because why not? Yeah, they gave a reason for her being able to talk to animals now. That doesn't mean I have to like it. So would I. Oh, and by the way, dolphins can fly. God, were the creators of this movie on mescaline? Probably would explain why this film is the way it is. Anyway, the dolphins are in on Maltravers and his plans to hunt whales, and they decide to tell Elizabeth, but unfortunately Jeffries overhears their conversation, and he informs Maltravers. Jeffries is then told to telegraph the whaling captains to begin hunting whales, and he's also told to advise a quote-unquote special friend to be ready for action. And who might this special friend be? Why, it's a freaking shark! A shark that he can somehow talk to.
Baby! Ice, I have a message from the boss! Hey, me and the boys are ready to go into action anytime you say, guy!
Okay, movie, you just contradicted yourself. You gave a reason for why Elizabeth can now talk to animals. It wasn't a good reason, but it was still a reason. So why now can Jeffries talk to animals? Did he cry and have that magical moonbeam bullshit happen to him? You can't just give a reason behind something and then turn around and act like that reason doesn't even exist. Either people need to have that moonbeam shit happen to them in order for them to talk to animals, or they don't. Pick one and stick with it. So we cut to Elizabeth sitting in her room, and Top and Ronnie tell her that she needs to explain to her father why she doesn't want to marry Maltravers.
Listen, you can't just give in like that. This game isn't even in the second half yet. You've gotta fight!
Of course I'm going to fight. Now I know you two are on my side. We can foil Everard and help those poor whales.
Oh my god, can the movie please stop talking about whales? This is supposed to be a film based on the Titanic, not Moby Dick. Ugh. Elizabeth then goes to her father's room and she tells him that she doesn't want to marry Maltravers.
I have absolutely no intention of marrying Everard.
Remember that scene from earlier where Elizabeth and her father were discussing her engagement to Maltravers?
Elizabeth, don't be impertinent. You have a position to keep up. Your stepmother and I simply want what's best for our little girl.
Well, in this scene, her father acts completely different.
My one and only plan, dear girl, is to see you as happy as possible. And I would never dream of forcing you to do something you don't want to.
And the movie has contradicted itself twice. You're right. Makes me wonder what other kinds of bullfuckery this film is going to toss our way. I had to ask.
Anyway, the mice and the dog lead Elizabeth and Don Juan to each other, and the two decide to dance. You know you're dealing with a bad movie when the love story in the last film was more believable than in this film.
Come on, let's have some party music.
Kind of a nitpick on my end, but the music in this movie is pretty bad in my opinion. I mean, it's not, oh my god, I want to cut my ears off bad, but it just doesn't sound good. So the stepmother, who's evil by the way, is not happy about Elizabeth's decision to not marry Maltravers. Elizabeth then tells her off, and she storms out of the room. In the next scene, the stepmother and Maltravers conspire to have the Titanic sunk, and Jeffries hands the telegraph operator the paper that tells Maltravers' whalers to begin their hunt. The mice then get the genius idea to chew the telegraph wires.
To paraquote Nostalgia Critic in his review of Legend of the Titanic, I'm sure that won't backfire in any way.
So Jeffries tells the shark that the Titanic needs to be sunk. The shark then gathers some buddies of his and they talk about how they're going to sink the ship.
And I'm gonna get tentacles to heave that iceberg right in the Titanic's path.
Oh, this fucking character. This is Tentacles, everyone. A giant, dumb, dog-faced octopus that the sharks want to trick into helping them sink the Titanic.
Well, let's just call it a bet. A couple of my boys think they can heave an iceberg farther than Tentacles can.
That sounds like great fun.
Back to the human characters, Maltravers holds Elizabeth's father at gunpoint and forces him to sign two papers. One that would give Maltravers global whaling rights, and another that will leave the stepmother as the sole beneficiary of the father's fortune. Oh, and they tie him up, too. After that, Tentacles goes down to the bottom of the ocean, grabs an ice chunk, and then hurls it at the ship.
To those of y'all who may not know, ice has a density of around 4/5 that of water, and thus it can float. So Tentacles would never have been able to find ice resting on the seafloor. I get that this is a cartoon, but I'm not going to let that one slide.
Anyway, Maltravers and the other bad guys steal a lifeboat and get away. After that, the Titanic collides with the ice chunk and the ship starts to sink. As everyone starts to make their way to the lifeboats, Don Juan and Elizabeth go looking for the father. The ship's captain then tells some other sailors to telegraph out an SOS, but uh-oh, the mice chewed through the telegraph wires.
You didn't repair it after? That's against every rule of the Seamouse Maritime Union! Do you realize what you've done, you little fools?
After that bit of scolding, Top and Ronnie rush to the severed wires and they try to fix them. They acquire some additional help from this other sailor mouse named Camembert, and they decide to tie the wires to his mustache.
Oh, Camembert.
Well, what did you two expect? You were running electricity through him. Of course he was going to die.
The dolphins, as well as Tentacles now, start fighting the sharks so that the people in the lifeboats will be safe. Oh, and take a listen to what this ship attendant has to say.
There's room for everyone!
No, your ears didn't fool you, folks. There was room for everyone, even though in real life there wasn't.
That is just unbelievably offensive. Do I even need to explain how wrong it was for the creators of this film to do that?
Anyway, Don Juan and Elizabeth find the father and they get to the lifeboats. The father gets on, but for some reason Elizabeth and Don Juan decide to stay aboard the ship. Don't ask me, the characters in this movie are a bunch of dipshits. So Tentacles is then told that the Titanic is starting to break in half, and there are still a lot of people trying to get on the lifeboats. So he decides to hold the thing together.
You're a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm just a kid. The truth is, this terrible thing that's happening is all my fault.
No, Tentacles, it's not your fault. This all happened because of an evil, greedy human being.
Lady? Tentacles may not have intended to sink the Titanic, nor did he mastermind it. He was tricked. But he was still an accomplice to the crime. Therefore, he's guilty by association.
Whatever. The whales show up, everyone is rescued, the ship finally sinks, and Tentacles dies.
I suppose that's kind of sad, even though he was the one that caused it. But fortunately for me, this film is almost over, and thank God. I'm really tired of watching this now.
So as it turns out, Maltravers and the other bad guys get lost at sea, Don Juan and Elizabeth get married, oh, and so does Top, by the way. But it seems that there's some terrific news, and they all go down to the Brooklyn Bridge.
I have the most wonderful surprise for you!
What? No, movie!
You just contradicted yourself again. This is the third time. He was dead. The freaking ship pulled him down and then crushed him. I mean, Christ. How many more contradictions are you going to pull out of your ass?
That's it, folks. I can't take this film anymore. The movie cuts back to the older Top and his grandkids. He says that even though Maltravers is gone, the whales are still being hunted, because of course they are, and the film finally pans out to the end credits.
And that was Legend of the Titanic, everyone, and it gets a T for terrible.
In all honesty, the only real thing that I can even praise this movie for is its animation. The animation is better than what was given to us in Legend Goes On, but here's the thing. Legend Goes On didn't actively try to annoy me, nor did it pull any of the offensive crap that this movie did. Which leads me to my biggest gripe with this film. It's offensive as hell. We're talking Fugitive Hunter levels of offensiveness here. Legend of the Titanic amounts to little more than an hour and 20-minute long anti-whaling propaganda piece. Look, I have no formal opinions on whaling, and I can't really tell y'all where I stand on that subject. And as such, I don't have a problem with a movie having an anti-whaling message in it. However, there is a wrong and a right way to convey it. The creators gave a message, but they were doing it at the expense of people who really actually perished. That's just fucking wrong. The equivalent would be if I were to make a film about the 2011 Japan earthquake, but insinuate that no one died and have an underlying message against deer hunting. Then there's other shit that just brings this movie down even further, such as its penchant for contradicting itself, and who could forget all the annoying and dumbass characters. Mr. Karate and the other creators should have been ashamed that they made this. At least it did one thing for me, though. It made me more appreciative of the last film we reviewed. Speaking of which, I'm almost convinced that Legend Goes On was made as a parody of this film, seeing as how it was released afterwards. Now, hear me out, Legend Goes On had far more likable characters. The creators of that movie probably knew that it wasn't going to be taken seriously, so they made it as absurd and campy as possible. And finally, that film didn't insinuate that there were no fatalities. I may just be speculating, but it wouldn't surprise me in the least if that were the case.
But maybe, just maybe, I'm being a bit too harsh on this movie. So we have yet again joining us to give his second opinion, Mike, Nasty Pro Dancer, Kirchenberger.
My opinion on the movie is really, it had okay music, it was more for the modern day, but some of the clips were actually repeated several times, probably to save money on budget, you know, just the whole thing on that. The characters' look and development were almost like a Little Mermaid feel or Cinderella feel to it. It just was, they wanted to twist it around, especially the magical creatures in it. They wanted to twist it in some way to make it more of a Disney feel to it, of a more happier feel to it at the end. But anyways, let's say we just wrap this up and I'll rate it. I gotta rate it probably a 5 because it was a decent movie. I will admit to this. However, though, it could have been better. But for the film, for like the artist's development, probably at the time, they just had to like repeat the scenes, draw it differently because it was all hand drawn. Like people had to hand draw it. Like that's what people don't understand for stuff back in the day. They can't just put it on a computer to digitally enhance it. No, it's hand drawn. But anyways, that's my opinion on it. Anyways, let's give it back to Kenny and he'll explain more on you.
Thank you so very much, Mike. I again appreciate you coming here to share your thoughts. Well, folks, Legend of the Titanic was a pretty awful film. It was also kind of hard to sit through. But do you guys want to know what the worst part is? They made a sequel, and I'm reviewing it. I'll see you guys in the next review. Oh, God!